Good evening. Welcome to Hope for
Hello.
Healing. I'm your host, Dr. John Stracks, and I'm joining you from my office here in Chicago. I'm a physician who focuses on the reduction and elimination of physical symptoms using mind-body medicine methods. If you'd like to learn more about my practice, I do practice telehealth, and my staff will be happy to talk with you more about that. You can find information about our services at www.drstracks.com. This Hope for Healing videocast series is one of many joint efforts between me and the folks at Curable. For those of you who are not yet Curable users, Curable is an amazing app that offers science-backed techniques for chronic pain recovery. We've been working together for about 6 years now, and we created this video series because we want to help people in pain understand the connection between what is happening in their life and what's happening in their body. Tonight, my guest is Dr. Jennifer Huggins. She's a clinical pain psychologist in Los Angeles, California. Dr. Huggins woke up one morning at age 23 with terrible pain, was eventually told that there was nothing that could be done. And so after years on the medical merry-go-round, she found out about mind-body medicine and was ultimately able to heal. As a result, she became a clinical pain psychologist, and helping others to heal from mind-body medicine issues is now her life's passion. Jennifer, I know that people are eager to hear your story of healing and also about how you work with clients. And so welcome to Hope for Healing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And it's super excited to talk with you. You and I have both been in this field for many years now. And like so many other people who enter into this part of medicine, you got started because you had your own health issues that couldn't get solved through conventional means. And I think it's helpful for people who are listening to know that as practitioners, we're human, we have our own pain issues as well. And so I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what happened to you and how you ultimately found your way out.
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely it's a story that I feel is imperative to my work and really why I chose to, go into this field and why I'm so passionate about it. So, as you said, I was in my early 20s, and what happened is I ended up at many doctor's offices for what I thought was a UTI. And I had bladder, pelvic pain, some bloating, looked eventually like I was pregnant, and no doctor knew what was going on. And it was very discouraging. I went from doctor to doctor. It was very scary. Didn't know what was happening. It felt like a really bad UTI, although nothing was culturing out. So it was very confusing. I was put on rounds of antibiotics, although nothing was being cultured out because doctors didn't know what to do. And because my symptoms matched, what would appear to be a UTI. Eventually, I ended up in a gynecologist's office, and this gynecologist said, it sounds like interstitial cystitis. And I had never heard of that. It sounded like a big fancy term that was daunting and scary, which I think is a big part of the perpetuation of persistent pain are the labels that we get and the messages that we receive, which is definitely part of my story. I received a lot of messages about what I could and couldn't do, what I could and couldn't eat, and also how long I would be in pain, which according to really every biomedical doctor I went to was going to be forever because it was an incurable, as they put it, diagnosis. And, of course, not of course, but often when you get a chronic pain diagnosis or something equivalent, something that is mysterious in a way or incurable or difficult to manage, first thing we do usually is jump on Google, right? So I jumped on Google and typed in the diagnosis, and that feels like a death sentence. It is really a hopeless experience. So I would read about it, and what doesn't come up usually is mind body stuff, mind body treatment, mind body, conceptualizations or understandings. But what comes up is all the medical stuff, PubMed or Medscape or forums The Interstitial Cystitis Network is a I don't know, not a facility, but a community, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, that I was involved with at first. And same kind of messages.
And, you know, for you, it was interstitial cystitis, but it can be any of these diagnoses, right? Interstitial cystitis or fibromyalgia or chronic pain or back pain, migraines, dizziness, stomach issues, like all of it. You get so much information initially about how your life as you know it is over, essentially, and so little can be done. And so that's must have been what you experienced back then, that just all these messages that it wasn't going to be able to be healed.
Correct. Correct. It's really all you get. And then you get on forums with other people, patients, whatever you want to call them, who are in the same boat, in the same fear. And there's a colluding of that, which, exacerbates the fear even more because other patients haven't gotten better either. Oh my gosh, right? We're just, looking back, what I know now is I was just looking in the wrong places. I didn't know where to look though. And there is a lot of other resources, which luckily I found and we'll get to, that allowed me to heal and be now pain-free for up to, I'd say, about 14 years with no symptoms at all. And to your point, absolutely, it really doesn't matter, I would say, what diagnosis or label we get. I mean, if we get cancer or something, that's a different story, right? But when it comes to chronic pain syndromes, so like you mentioned, migraines, fibromyalgia, carpal tunnel, plantar fasciitis, irritable bowel, which we might not consider a pain syndrome, but these are what we call, mind-body syndrome equivalents, okay? Or pain equivalents is more the better way to say it. I said that wrong, but pain equivalents, right? That would fall under the category of mind-body syndromes. So we can't get tripped up on if it's not pain, it's not a mind-body syndrome. So irritable bowel, I would say for some, the majority, tinnitus, I've treated a lot of that. Dizziness, as you mentioned, lightheadedness, it could be lots of different syndromes and label.
Fatigue, and yeah, and even lately, I think you're about to say long COVID, we think is starting to come under this category, and you've seen some people with post-concussion syndrome.
That's
and
right.
Yeah, all of those.
So we really have to be careful, which is challenging, especially at the beginning when we don't know a lot about mind-body syndrome and mind-body disorders, is to not get attached to the label.
Yeah.
And to the diagnosis.
Yeah. And so you had these symptoms. Probably a lot had to do with bladder symptoms and pelvic issues. And it took I think you said it took a long time for you to find some relief, right?
It did. It took a long time because I was on, like you mentioned, the medical merry-go-round. However, looking back, and I think clients may relate to this, if I would have found mind-body treatment at the beginning, I don't know if I would have been open to that, right? Because it's so not in our paradigm. So we don't have, a file for that. It doesn't really quite make sense to our brain that we have these raging or whatever physical symptoms in our body, and they're physical. So they're not all in our head. They're not real. We're not crazy. None of that. They're very real. They're very physical. It's really what we're differentiating is the cause, okay? From, what we may have been told or may assume or think or have read is that there's some pathological, structural abnormality of some sort that is causing the pain or the symptom. And moving
And
from,
I think that in a medical context, right? And I say this to people all the time, that if we had 100 physicians talking to you and I at the moment, and we asked those 100 physicians, medical personnel, how many of you think that pain means tissue damage? I think 98 or 99 of them would raise their hand and say, yes, that's what it is. And there's just so much evidence now that the two can be related, they're not the same thing. You can get plenty of pain without tissue damage. You can get plenty of tissue damage without pain, it turns out. And yet the medical system still is sort of operating on this 20th century model that if you hurt, then there must be something wrong that needs to be treated biomedically.
That's right.
And
That's
the
right.
evidence just isn't there anymore.
It's so it's mind-boggling. You're right. And so what I've worked with doctors. I worked at Kaiser Permanente for, not to put down the organization, it's actually a great organization in many ways, but I worked in pain management. And I always say, if you think about that term, pain management,
Yeah.
it's actually fascinating if you think about it,
Mhm.
because it's almost like unconsciously there's these bright flashing lights. It's like management, right? You
Mhm.
can only manage this, right? It's not pain recovery.
Yeah.
And that influences us, and we may not even know it. You're right. There must be something wrong. It's a very physically based, robotic, mechanically based interpretation of the body. I didn't ever have one doctor ask me what was going on in my life.
That's like, that is mind-boggling to
Right.
me. And I've done a lot of these interviews, we've talked at conferences, and I cannot believe how often I hear that. Because I'm typical, and obviously not the typical physician, but it would never ever occur to me not to ask somebody
Sure.
what's going on in their lives and then listen to the answer too, right? I mean, that's one of the problems too, is that even a physician does say, what's going on in your life, oftentimes they're like typing in the corner of the office,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
who's
Right.
gonna be honest about that answer?
Mhm.
And so I cannot believe, I mean, I can totally believe it, and it's so disappointing to me
But
as a medical professional that nobody thought to say, like, hey, can you tell me what's going on?
yeah, right. And look, it's not their training. However, it should be, but it's
Mhm.
not their training.
Yeah.
Although we're human,
Mhm. Mhm.
we're human.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we might think, okay, maybe they don't have the paradigm of mind body syndromes. However, they must know, we all know that stress makes a condition worse. I mean, that's just basic, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So, I mean, just a question for that alone could be
Sure.
something, right? Regardless of the stress is causing your sensations. That is elite, perhaps, for some medical doctors.
Mhm.
But what's going on in your life, because stress can make these conditions worse, would be just a beautiful step forward, just to
I
start.
absolutely, I agree. And so anyway, so you wandered for a long time, and
Yeah.
then after about a decade, I think, what happened? How did you sort of find your way into this realm and ultimately start to get better?
Okay. So it took me really trying everything physically based, and I, not always, but I often see that that's the course that clients take, is they have to, what I say, check the medical boxes, which is why I said, if I found out about mind body syndrome treatments first, I might not have gone that way, because we want the quick fix. So that's what I was looking for. I was looking for the quick fix. I was looking for the magical IC specialist, which doesn't exist. And I was looking for, if anyone told me, oh, this diet, helped me or cured me, I'm onto that diet. So it was a lot of that, and a lot of disappointment, and hopelessness, and all of that along the way. So to answer your question,
And
it,
some invasive treatments too, right? I mean,
oh God,
like antibiotics and even IV antibiotics, and I mean,
yes,
heavy duty
what,
treatments.
yes, absolutely, which is just shocking. It's unbelievable still to this day, looking back, that that's what was recommended, and I went through. And pain interventions themselves are invasive. They're interventional pain. So in pain management, we get what? Epidurals, maybe a spinal cord stimulator, radio frequency ablation, where we're burning the nerves.
Mhm.
so that the
Right.
communication between,
We've got one patient whose family flew her to South Africa to have them drill holes in her skull to try to relieve the headaches. That's how far it goes, right? That's how.
yeah, you read about like that's like old where they used I don't remember they used to do that to relieve like evil spirits from the brain, right? I don't know when that was, but a long time ago. So that sounds like just very barbaric. Wow. Okay. So I didn't have that done, which is a good thing. But yes, I had catheters put up my urethra, which was very painful to get hydrodistension with a cystoscopy with hydrodistension so they could explore my bladder and tell me all the things that were wrong with it, which, back to your point previously, were likely incidental findings.
Right.
So perhaps I had, I don't know, scars or some ulcerations or whatever in my bladder wall, and I probably still have them,
Mhm.
right? And I'm pain free. So these incidental findings, but what I did is I got really sick of being in the medical field, and I started becoming very angry at doctors and angry at the fact that I was getting worse and worse, and I was getting a lot of disrespect. I felt just kind of like, we don't know what to do with you, like, sorry, like that kind of thing. Maybe not in that tone, but that's how it felt. And so I was like, I forget doctors. I hate doctors. I'm not doing this. And so I went to the alternative field, and that didn't work either. And I ended up coming across a mind body coach named Abigail Sidley, and she introduced me to Dr. John Sarno, who is the late John Sarno, who has written several books that are all up there on my shelf,
Mhm.
my little shrine.
Right.
And the reason for that is, he really is, not to be cheesy, but really is my hero. Because without his books and his, advocacy and his mission and what he did in his life, I would not be pain free today. So I ended up reading about, not only Sarno, but lots of other books on mind body treatment. And I dove in. I got excited, and I was committed. And I think that's required. I had a really open mind because I would have done anything. And I think an open mind is also very required. Just open, 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 no matter what you have been believing and thinking, if it's not working, it's not working. So taking an alternative path that might not make a whole lot of sense to your brain right now, or that you might have some doubt and skepticism about, is fine. Have the doubt and skepticism, bring it with you, but also do your best to keep an open mind. Look at the reality that, I've been doing all these physical treatments and they're not working. Maybe I need to be looking elsewhere. And so I did that, and I
And
coached with this.
thinking back to that sort of that, it's a key moment for everybody, right? Where the moment where somebody changes from, oh, a mind body explanation doesn't make sense initially, right? You said if somebody had said that to you when you were 24 years old, you would have been offended, probably.
Probably.
And so something switched. And, a lot of it is you tried so many different things. Was there anything else that in that moment when you came across that coach that you said, oh, I see how this can apply to me?
Well, one thing is she had had my diagnosis, and she had had pain, other diagnoses too. Now, if she didn't have my diagnosis itself, I still don't think it would have mattered, but there was a kinship. If she had had back pain or something or whatever, pain is pain.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, so that was one thing. I trusted her.
Mhm.
I trusted her, but she she gave me a lot of examples of other clients that she had helped, and I even talked to some of them, which was helpful. And just the readings that she gave me, and what clicked for me is, in the readings, it really talked about, it's kind of the inconsistencies of the beliefs I was holding. So, and I can give some examples of that in a moment. But also, this phenomenon of, the nervous system and stress, and I'd really noticed that when I had become more preoccupied and obsessed with my symptoms, which I teach clients not to use that word, which I can talk about later. But my sensations, when I became more preoccupied with them and afraid of them and freaked out about them, sure enough, I was in what I call the flare. And for days, I also was told not to eat and drink a myriad of foods and drinks and by the medical system because they weren't safe, right? So the opposite of that is fear them, and pain is fear in many ways. So I became obsessed with food. And what didn't make sense, so as far as inconsistencies, what didn't make sense is I could take a bite of a safe food, or I mean, unsafe, excuse me, food. And within seconds, I would have raging symptoms. And that did not make logical sense to me. And she helped me to see these things. So it was, you start to question what you've been thinking, what you've been believing, and then kind of reality test them. Like,
Yeah.
and zoom out of your experience and really look at like the facts or what's going on. Also, the personality traits that can be common in mind body syndromes were me to a T. And if you'd like me to mention those, I can.
Yeah, what kind of things are you thinking about, or what kind of things did you recognize at the time? And I know, a lot of people who are listening have an idea, but what did you recognize in yourself that
Sure.
helped put this together?
Yeah, well, the three, or I guess four, but the three main ones are perfectionism. And we don't have to have everything perfectly in order in our house to be a perfectionist. Some people misunderstand that. We can be a perfectionist at work or in another area of our life. It doesn't have to be what we might assume. So we have to really be careful about saying, oh, I'm not a perfectionist, and really look at all areas of our life. Are we, hard driving for success, nothing's ever good enough type thing. People pleasing. So putting others' needs and wants before our own, difficulty saying no, kind of the yes person, that kind of thing. Builds resentment, tension, it can create symptoms. And then the third one is, which is really common, is self-criticism and being hard on ourselves, being kind of having our inner bully. And those were all things, people pleasing more or less for me, but the first and the third for sure were pretty rampant in my life at that time.
Yeah. And then was recognizing the connection enough for you, or did you actually need to do some work in those areas to calm those down, the self-criticism and the perfectionism?
Yeah,
How did that evolve for you?
definitely had to do work because they were a lifetime of, they feel they're your kind of feel like your personality. A lot of clients say, well, that's just who I am. And I often reframe that as, well, it's just what you do,
Yeah.
you know. So yes, I had to do work around it. A big part of it is awareness that we are in these modes of being. We are in perfectionistic mode because generally we're on autopilot.
Mhm.
We may not recognize that we are being a perfectionist, a people pleaser, or beating ourselves up in our head because it's so familiar. So bringing awareness to the times that we are in those modes, and we can usually tell when we're just not feeling calm and relaxed. We might check in. What's going on? Am I being hard on myself? What was I just thinking? So we start to build awareness, and that can be 15% of the battle, if you want to call it that, or more.
Yeah.
Because the awareness allows you to step back from it. So you're not like this, you're like this,
Mhm.
right? And that in and of itself can help you sort of say, I'm gonna reverse here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna calm, and I'm gonna take a different road. The report I'm writing it's good enough. I don't need to spend another 10 hours on it, right? Something like that.
And I want to spend some time because now, that's what you do professionally.
Yeah.
And as we get to that, so what do you remember about how your symptoms went away? Did they go away pretty quickly as you learned about this, or did it take a while? Or sort of how did you go from regular symptoms and 9 years of searching to not have any symptoms for 14 years after that?
Sure. So it took a long time because I didn't find out about my body's syndromes or disorders for 7 years,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
8 years, something like that. So it took me
Yeah.
a really long time because of that.
Mhm.
And also because I had to go through the medical boxes,
Sure.
yeah, the physical treatments to make sure, to disprove them, I guess, to myself and to
Mhm.
realize that they aren't going to work. So
Yeah.
there's a level of desperation, I think, that
Right.
needs to.
And then once you did find out about Mind Body and the coach who you found, can you repeat her name?
Yeah,
People.
she's great. Her name's Abigail
Mhm.
and her last name's Steidley, and that's Steidley.
Got
And
it.
she has a website. I'm not sure if she's still coaching, but I know she has a lot of coaches under her.
Yeah. And so once
So
once you found her and entered in this realm, at that point, did the symptoms start to go away pretty quickly, or did it still take a while even after you
it
learned
took a
about it?
little while. It took a little while. Yeah, I was open to it. I was excited about it, and uh, however, I had years of being told a certain thing and being in a lot of fear, right, for a long time, and having developed a particular relationship with that part of my body,
Mhm.
and it was a very angry, aggressive, adversarial, I hate you relationship. So I had to learn to, feel comfortable and safe in my body. So it took me, I would say, if I had to put a number on it, roughly 2 years, 2-ish
Mhm.
years
Yeah.
before I was symptom free. However, along the way, things were getting better,
Sure.
better, and better. And they got better and better and better based on my level of fear. In other words, said, my fear going like this,
Mhm.
my level of preoccupation with the symptoms going like this, you know, um, my stance of neutrality to the symptoms being very strong, not caring about them anymore, recognizing that that's the very thing that keeps them going. So, learning about those concepts takes a little bit of time
Yeah.
for some people.
Absolutely. And and I say to people all the time, right? Everybody's on their own healing journey. And we've heard all kinds of stories from people who sort of learn about this and symptoms go away very quickly to I've interviewed patients who we're now calling 2%ers. So one of my patients got 2% better each month for 5 years. That's how she got better. And everywhere in between, you and I have talked about no matter how long it takes, as you start to feel better, right? That's invaluable. And so whether it's 2 months or 2 years or longer, the journey towards working on this and slowly moving forward, like it always pays off in the
Right.
end.
It restores hope.
Yeah.
And
And so you were already a psychologist at this point, right? You'd been through school and were you practicing at that point, or did you enter
no,
into the psychology world after that?
after.
Okay.
So I took a leave from
Hmm.
grad school
Got
when
it.
I was at my worst.
Hmm.
And, I felt too physically, if we want to use the word disabled, which is really a terrible word to be using.
Hmm.
It's I really discourage using that word.
Hmm.
But however, I did. And I really felt so tied to the physical symptoms, so emotionally distraught that I couldn't continue in my daily life.
Hmm.
And looking back, that was one of the things that kept me in pain was allowing it to rule and control my activities and behaviors because of the fear and the attachment to it.
Hmm.
One of
Hmm.
the things that kept me in pain for so long.
Yeah.
So getting myself out of school, isolating, being at home, looking up everything I could to get rid of my symptoms was really the worst things I could have been doing.
Hmm.
So the other thing too I want to mention here is one of the things that's really tricky and non-instinctual, paradoxical, is we have to be really careful. It's a fine line because we really don't want to be having our hard driving goal to be to get rid of our symptoms or our pain. Okay. And listeners might be thinking, what? Uh, because it does. And really, it's more of a conceptual idea because, of course, that's what we're doing. And I often use it as sort of macro, micro. So on a large macro sort of up here level, we all know that's what we're doing. That's the goal. That's why we're doing this. And we want to kind of leave it there. And on a micro, just, applicable, like we apply the knowledge that we're learning, and day to day, we cannot have that be the goal. Like, I got to get rid of these symptoms. Okay, so I'm going to meditate and meditate. Oh, my symptoms are still there, because then we're frustrated again. We're preoccupied again. We hate the symptoms again. We're focused on the body, not the mind. We don't have that neutrality. We're resisting. It's stressful. It promotes more tension. And the last thing I'll say there is our brain is always trying to protect us. Right. So if we cognitively interpret I'll just use the word symptoms just for ease here, our symptoms as threatening, as dangerous, right?
Mhm.
I have ulcers in my bladder. Oh no, right? Whatever it is, then when we have the pain or the symptoms, we're going to go into fear, and our brain is going to do everything it can to protect us by giving us pain so that we then take action or try to make it better somehow or whatever, because it believes there's a fundamental problem in our tissues. And same thing with conditioned responses. So, which I don't know if we'll have time to get into, but
Yeah.
does that make sense what I just said?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, it's such a big conceptual shift for everybody because the conventional medical system, like, it's the war on cancer. Like
Oh
we
gosh.
literally talk about diseases in terms of battles and weapons and
Wow.
military.
Right.
And there are times, right, if you have cancer, sometimes you need that kind of treatment. If you
Sure.
have an infection, we can use a medicine to get rid of the infection.
Sure.
But when we enter into spaces like this, where we're not feeling well, we have pain symptoms, we have fatigue symptoms, nobody's quite sure what's wrong,
Right.
healing looks so much different. And I think one of the things that I try to emphasize as much as I can is that the symptoms are not the enemy. It's not, we don't need a war on symptoms. We don't need a war on pain. We need to understand how our brain is trying to protect us. We need to understand that the symptoms have our back. They have our back. They're trying to protect us and make our lives easier. And so it's our job to enter into that and say, all right, if that's the case, if my brain feels the need to create this incredibly painful symptom in this part of my body, what is it trying to protect me from? Is it trying to protect me from a feeling, from a relationship, from a past experience, from a memory, from a task that I need to go do, to a conversation that's going to be uncomfortable? And then what can we learn that will help us enter into that so that our brain doesn't need to protect us in the same
What's
way?
the message? What's the message? You're right on. And one thing I say often is, the part of our body where we have the sensations, and I say sensations, I'm really big on language. Language is very, very important.
Yeah.
Our thoughts, the way we're thinking about what's going on, and the symptoms. Symptoms is a very medical term, and
Sure.
it implies there's something physically wrong. Like,
Mhm.
so I don't like that term at all.
Yeah.
So I encourage my clients to use sensations
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
the sensations in my body, if we even need to talk about it at all,
Mhm.
which I discourage as well,
Yeah.
because it reinforces again the preoccupation. Okay, so but what you're saying is what I often say is the body part is just an innocent bystander. It's
Yeah.
sitting there like, hey man, like I'm just hanging out, like
Mhm.
be like, I'm with you, like, be nice to me. And it doesn't know what's going on, it's not the problem.
Mm,
So we really want to move our attention. The body's fine. There's nothing wrong with the body if we have a mind body syndrome, which really the majority of chronic pain issues are. Okay, so we really want to develop a relationship with our body that is one of trust, that our body is strong, it's healthy, our body, there's nothing wrong with our body, and bring our attention to our brain. The focus is our brain, our thinking, our emotional reactions, which emotions happen in the body, but we have a label that we give it in our brain. So I'm angry, right? Um, and like you mentioned, whatever we might be going on, that the brain thinks it needs to give us sensations so that we focus on that
mhm,
rather than our rage or our anger towards whomever, or our sadness and our grief about someone who has passed
mhm,
and it's been too painful to process. Or one other one is an inner truth that is terrifying to look at and admit is
mhm.
going on. So
And
one
that,
might, an example might be, maybe someone is married and they are not attracted to women. They're married to a woman, and they're gay. They're attracted to men, and they're scared to look at that inner truth. Or maybe someone's a Harvard law professor and they did all this work or whatever, but they want to be a stand-up comedian, and that's their passion, but they can't imagine telling people that. What are you talking about? Or the
mhm.
shame they may bring on themselves, right?
Yeah. And so interestingly, when we talk about journal writing, and a lot of people have come across that in this
Yeah.
world, the research has shown that that's one of the reasons the journal writing is so helpful, is because it provides a place to let out those secrets in a safe way. And so when we're talking with people about that particular tool for healing, that's one of the ways that it does its job, is it gives us a safe place to start to let those inner truths out and put them somewhere where they become a little bit more real, and we can look at them and not feel like we're just holding them inside where nobody
Yeah,
can.
sometimes just getting them out is sometimes enough.
Yeah. And so, all right, so let's think about this. So eventually you went back to school, you became a clinical psychologist focused in this world. And so the people listening, a lot of them have been working on this for a long time, maybe some progress, maybe not some progress. But at some point, if people aren't making the progress they want, they frequently get referred to a therapist or a psychologist. And so if somebody's been working on this for a while and not making the progress that they want to see, and they knock on your door and come to see you, how do you start working on some of these areas and get them further unstuck so that they can feel better? What do you do initially that helps people move forward?
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to obviously find is, why are they so stuck? Why are we at this for, I don't know, however many years, and feeling disempowered, maybe, and like we don't know where else to go? There's something missing. Maybe something that hasn't been addressed. We want to be mindful of the type of therapist and psychologist we go to, and be sure that they're trained and in line, this is my opinion, with a mind body treatment, mind body syndrome
Mhm,
paradigm. Other terms for this are psychophysiological disorder, or PPD.
mhm,
Mm, There's, a website I could give if you'd like, for that at some point. But PPD, and then a lesser known term, but there are therapists out there that call themselves TMS therapists,
mhm, mhm,
TMS psychologists, which term that Dr. Sarno coined for chronic pain,
mhm,
stands for tension myoneural syndrome. So you want to, any of those three would be ideal, right? You find a therapist or psychologist who says, yes, I work with TMS Sarno work. Yes, I do PPD work. Yes, I do my body disorders work.
Mhm.
then generally we are going to be safer than in good hands. Then if we go to a therapist or psychologist that does CBT for pain management,
Mhm. Mhm.
we
Right.
want we don't
Right.
want we don't want
Because
management.
right, because so many people work in this paradigm of like the best you can do is you can manage the pain, and we can
Oh,
teach you how to not think that you can get healed, to live with your condition.
that's
And,
it.
and I know that's how they're trained, and I know that there are, major programs in pain management around the country, but it's so limiting. And one of my patients made an appointment to come see me, and her therapist said to her, "You have to stop doing this. How many times have I told you that you have to accept your
Oh,
pain?" She said that
terrible.
to her. I know.
Terrible. And again, these are the nocebo effects.
Mhm.
If listeners have not heard that term, it's a really important term to understand. It's a lesser known term. Excuse me, an itch. The placebo effect, most people have heard of, which is belief in good leads to good, right? We
Yep.
take a water pill, we believe it's going to cure our migraine, and it does.
Yep.
So the function of that is one and one thing only, and that's belief.
Mhm.
It so nocebo effect is belief in harm leads to harm, and those messages are just that.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so people find their way to
What
you.
I would do, yes.
Yeah, and your job now is to understand that they're not stuck. They don't have this pain that is other that they're never going to get rid of.
Yeah, I
They
explained that to
can,
them.
yep, and they can find their way forward. People who are here have probably worked with the Curable app. They've got some of the knowledge that we've been
Sure.
talking about, but they may have these personality traits, or they may have past histories. And so what happens then? What kind of strategies do you start to use with people?
So a lot, cognitive behavioral therapy may be the first thing. And again, we want to be careful of, CBT in this way or CBT in the management way. Okay.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
enough of that. What I do is I get really clear on how much doubt and skepticism they may still be holding about this treatment model,
mhm,
this treatment approach.
mhm.
They may be like, I believe it, but I don't know. And if there's even a 5% doubt, we got to work on that 5%.
Mhm,
And we need to get people to 100% belief that this is what's going on.
mhm,
Okay, that's very important. And that all lies into pain beliefs and nocebo effects and undoing messages that they're holding on to, negating them, finding counters to them that they resonate with. So that's the first thing I'm going to do and be looking for.
And what kind of strategies? Because I hear that question a lot. People will say, almost in those exact words, like I'm 95% on board, but I still have some doubt, or even on the other side, like, I
Yeah.
don't know if this is. How do you help people remove that doubt and continue forward with their belief that this can work for them? And I frequently will say, just as we're talking about this, that this is not a belief-based cure. This is a
Sure.
science-based treatment, but you have to understand why it's going to be helpful. You have to have some belief that it can be
Yeah.
helpful, or it won't be.
Right, right. And belief is science. That's the placebo effect, right? But yeah, absolutely. There's so much more. There's the neural pathways, there's all of that, nervous system upregulation.
Mhm,
So what I would do is I'm going to look at their cognitive thinking,
mhm,
reactionary, emotional, and
mhm,
behavioral responses to their pain.
mhm,
There's
mhm,
something often amiss there.
mhm,
Back to the is their goal so much, I got to get rid of this, I got to get rid of this, and they're doing all of these treatments with one eye open, like, are my symptoms still there? You know,
mhm,
that's a problem. That is not going to get us where we want to go.
mhm,
So I look for that. I look for how neutral are they? How
mhm,
outcome independent are they, or dependent are they
mhm,
on their symptoms or the sensations going away? Which sounds crazy, but really, the more we understand this concept, the more it makes sense. Okay.
mhm,
We have to relate to our sensations in a particular way, like I mentioned before. So I look for that. I teach them about that. I do a lot of psychoeducation,
mhm,
and I help them learn how to apply the education that they're learning to their day-to-day life and their sensations that they're having throughout the day, that day, maybe not tomorrow. They may not have some sensations tomorrow,
Mhm.
but today they have them,
Yep.
right? So we don't want to anticipate
Mhm.
that, that kind of thing. That's important too. So thinking, how are they thinking? How are they holding this? And are, how are they, times clients will know so much, but they don't know how to apply it.
Mhm. Mhm.
I may help them really learn how to apply the knowledge, apply the concepts.
Mhm.
So when I get a lot of pain and the pain increases, what do I do? What do I say? What do I think? And so I may be helping them with that. I'll look for trauma. Trauma is often something that is not addressed, or clients may not even know that there are traumatic incidents in their past, because it doesn't have to be they went to war
Mhm.
and that's the trauma, or they had some horrible abuse that is obviously trauma. It can be a little T,
Mhm. Yep.
or lots of little t's that equal one big T,
Mhm.
and that we aren't even realizing that is still being stored in our nervous system, and is part of the pain process because of the nervous system
Mhm.
increase and the fight flight we're going to be always in, emotional suppression as a result of it, stuff like that. So I might do some EMDR,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is a treatment for trauma. It's a very important treatment for trauma for
Yeah.
some of my clients.
Right.
And the last thing I'll say is I sometimes look for what we call secondary gain,
Mhm.
which is not generally a conscious thing. It's not like people are like trying to have their pain, but
Yeah.
and it may not even, it's not what generally caused it in the first place. But
Mhm.
over time, sometimes
Mhm.
there's, believe it or not, some benefits unconsciously
Mhm.
to having these symptoms.
Yeah.
And it could be anything from, now our husband's being nice to me,
Mhm. Mhm. Sure.
you know,
Sure.
and we may not even make that connection, right? So we may
Yeah.
need to look at
It's yeah, it's amazing to me how often my patients, as they start to realize and make these connections, will say to me, like, oh my goodness, when I was little, the only time people were nice to me was when I was sick. I have heard that from people over and over
oh my God,
and over again.
it's so true.
So, so let's rewind for a second. I want to go back to the CBT part, and I have some training in CBT and do some of that work with people too, as do the therapists who work
Okay.
here. And so, so somebody's working with you. You find that some of the beliefs are, I'm not going to get better. I don't know what to do about this. The pain must be physical. It feels so real. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about how you would use CBT techniques to help people move forward from there. And so um, say somebody comes in and you've seen you for a little bit and you guys start talking and they say like, I'm not having much success and I'm sure this can work. Like, I understand, I'm full on board with mind body, but I don't know that it's for me. Like, I don't think it can work for me. Is
Mhm.
there a way to then use CBT to help with that kind of thought or belief, do you think?
Yeah. So what I would say there is, well, first off, I would look at how that thought and belief is serving them.
Mhm, mhm,
And does that thought and belief keep you focused on your symptoms?
mhm, mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And does that, so a conversation more than, well,
Mhm,
let's find the evidence against that belief.
mhm,
It's
mhm,
going to be more of a conversation, and helping them sort of like kind of challenge the thinking
mhm,
in a gentle way.
mhm, mhm,
Like, well, wait a minute, let's look at that thought. If you're thinking that all the time,
mhm,
what do you imagine the emotional response might be to that
mhm,
thought?
mhm.
Right.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you're going to feel just, maybe depressed or discouraged or hopeless or fearful. And then when
Right.
the sensations come up, you're going to have a particular reaction to the sensations, like,
Mhm,
oh, resistance, or this is never going to work, or work for them and it's not going to be right. We have a certain mind body connection now with that belief and thought.
mhm, mhm.
Right. So then
Right.
I might have them do something like an evidence list, which is a
Mhm,
really common
mhm.
intervention,
Yeah.
where we start to build evidence for the fact that they have TMS. If
Mhm,
belief is part of the problem,
mhm,
Okay. So why are they thinking it's not going to work for them?
mhm,
That's what
mhm.
I want to find out. Why
Right.
are they thinking that? Because it hasn't so far. And
Mhm.
then again we backtrack as to, well, why hasn't it?
Right.
What are the thoughts we're thinking when the symptoms come up?
Mhm,
And if someone's struggling and it hasn't worked for them all that time, there's something going on with their relationship. I'm sorry if this is redundant, but there's something going on with their relationship to their symptoms that we're going to need to cognitively reframe.
mhm, mhm.
Okay. We're going to need to, um, and sometimes even get out of our head entirely and not reframe anything,
Mhm, mhm,
meaning develop a neutral
mhm,
stance where our sensations no longer matter.
mhm, mhm.
And that's a little bit, I mean, that's sort of alternative CBT, but in a way, right?
Right.
Is we are not buying into the thinking
Mhm, mhm.
that's coming up. We're
Right.
allowing it to kind of be there, but we know better.
Right.
And we know better by diving into the literature,
Mhm, mhm.
really really getting it. If we really get how mind body syndromes work,
Mhm.
then we know it's not like it doesn't discriminate.
Right.
It's not like it's gonna work for you, but not for you, and not for you, and not for you.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
Mhm,
If we're doing these application processes.
mhm,
So it's not that. And I'd look for their stage of readiness,
mhm, mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and you know, emotional suppression.
Mhm.
Have they been working on that?
Yeah.
How are they feeling their emotions? If they
Right.
are not, that
Yeah.
can be a sticking point too, because sometimes people approach this all cognitively.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're suppressing their anger and their
Yeah.
sadness, and they're terrified of their emotions.
Mhm.
And voila, the symptoms are going to continue.
Yeah. And so from a cognitive standpoint, we have these thoughts, we have these beliefs, and we work on them educationally and
Yes.
experientially and through
Yeah.
the techniques and the evidence list. And sometimes I'll do some role playing with people. And then what I think I heard you just say and want to highlight is that oftentimes our emotions play a role too. And I think emotions, or at least personally, like I think emotions are hard. They're kind of scary, and a lot of people don't get great education and instruction in
Mm.
emotions
Oh my
when
God.
they're young. And so how do you encourage people to enter into that emotional place
That is,
and learn to be comfortable with that?
yeah, it's a process. And that is the one of the biggest parts of my work, really. Eventually, maybe not right away,
Uh-huh.
but it often becomes a huge part of the work.
Mhm,
And I do a technique called ISTDP for
mhm,
this.
mhm, mhm,
And it can be part of CBT as well.
mhm,
But the idea here is we need to get rid of the terms positive emotions and negative emotions.
mhm,
So
mhm,
just like pain management, right? In our vernacular, we have now unconsciously called emotions negative. So if they're negative emotions, what are we going to do? Those are negative. We're definitely not going to want to feel those,
Yep.
right? So even in our language, we're calling them negative and positive, which is just not good. So growing up, I would say, oh my gosh, I have no research evidence, but I would say like 99% of people, including myself, were not encouraged to feel our feelings. So whether it was overt or covert or
Mhm,
abusive or loving, whatever, it doesn't matter.
mhm,
We were generally shut down
mhm,
from
mhm.
feeling
Yeah.
early on.
Yeah.
But we were born to feel, just like our heartbeat beats. We
Mhm,
are feeling, thinking beings.
mhm,
So we cannot escape our emotions as much. Well, we can, but then we might get mind body disorders or
mhm.
something else.
Right.
But they are part of being human. So I
Yeah.
kind of say to clients, and I usually say it later, like, well, if you don't like your emotions, like, too bad, you're, we have them,
We have
right?
them. We have them. It's
We have
just,
them.
yeah, we have them because we're human beings.
Because we're human and they may be unpleasant at times. And if we feel them in a healthy way, they will move through
Mhm, mhm.
and they will
Yeah.
not get stuck. But right now, they're there. You just are stuffing them and they're causing way big problems, way more than you're imagining feeling your emotions would cause.
Yeah, there's a series of books I like called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, which is sort
Oh,
of an interesting title.
right.
But one of the things she talks about in there is how often her clients will say to her, "Look, I can't get mad or I can't get sad because it'll go on forever. There's no end to
Yes.
it." And she says to them, "There is an end. You just don't know it because you've never had the opportunity
Right.
to
They're going on
experience."
forever now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anger
And
is the most avoided.
once emotions start to flow, it's like anything else, right? They come up and then there's a peak and then they come back down. And oftentimes, like if we really let them flow, it can come up and down very quickly, a couple of minutes
Absolutely. It's
oftentimes.
just a matter of resistance to it.
Hmm.
And the most misunderstood emotion is anger. And the most avoided emotion by far is
Hmm.
anger.
Hmm.
Because people do not, they misunderstand what anger looks like.
Yeah.
And they think anger means we're screaming, we're yelling, we're throwing things, we're ah. And
Mhm.
that is not anger, that's anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's anxiety about our anger that makes us discharge
Mhm.
and look like what everyone in the world thinks is anger.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I educate clients a lot about that, and that's a big one. You really need to quietly internally feel anger, and that's actually what it looks like
Mhm.
when we learn how to feel anger. It's an internal process. It's
Mhm.
not the raw that clients are so afraid of, or that they saw their dad or their mom do, or whatever.
Yeah, I have a story about that that you'll appreciate. And so I graduated from residency and fellowship in 2009. And
Okay.
2009 is it's literally the worst year to look for a job in the history of job looking, right? It
That's
was
when I
right.
graduated from my doctorate.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And
Nice.
so right in the middle of the recession. And so I was living in Michigan. There were no jobs in Michigan. I was trying to figure out what to do. And I flew to Madison, Wisconsin to interview with the University of Wisconsin. It was like, so in the middle of February, it was like 1 degree. I was in a hotel. I was an hour ahead on the time zone. So I couldn't sleep. So I went down to the exercise room at 4:30 in the morning because I couldn't sleep. It was like 50 degrees in the exercise room.
Oh, jeez.
And I had an interview, starting at 8. And I get on the treadmill and I've got this toe pain that I can't make go away. And I'm interviewing in 5 hours. I'm like, I'm Dr. Stracks. This is what I do. Like, I can't even get it to go away on my own. And I had just been reading about like emotional expression and embodying emotions. And so I'm sitting there on the treadmill. I'm like, gosh, I wonder if I'm angry. Like, what could there to be angry about? It's 4:30 in the morning in a strange city on a 1 degree day when there's no jobs in like anywhere
That's
in the
the
world. Like,
thing.
what's to be angry about? And so I was like, I think I should like try this. And so like I'm gonna embody anger. And so I had this thought there on the treadmill, like I'm gonna make every cell in my body feel the anger. I'm just going to become anger. And then like and breathing and there on the treadmill in Madison, Wisconsin at 4:45 in the morning, like I became anger, like no sound to it, just sort of an internal
Yeah.
awareness of it. And the toe pain melted. I had taken a physical sensation
Yep.
and turned it into an emotion, and then it was gone. I didn't get the job. So
You didn't get the job,
I didn't get the job.
but you got that, which is way
Yeah.
better. You
Yes.
got that experience, which is way better.
Yeah.
Hopefully, hope. Yeah. I mean, really, I've seen stuff like that with clients, in the room,
Mhm.
in sessions,
Yeah.
where I had a client the other day who was very upset. Upset is not an emotion, by the way. I'm going to correct that.
Mhm. Mhm.
X-nay that cover word.
Mhm.
Was very sad.
Mhm.
However, sadness is an easier emotion to express for
Mhm.
some
Mhm.
people.
Sure.
And she was she was intellectualizing, okay,
Mhm.
about her sadness. So she wasn't feeling her sadness. She was talking about her sadness,
Mhm.
meaning, and then this happened, then that happened, the story, right? Which is not feeling.
Mhm.
And so, I started, we've working together for a little while. So we have the relationship for me to do this. I started pressing a bit for what else are we feeling, right? What else is going on? Because she'd been doing great for a while, and at that week, her pain sensations had really increased. So
Mhm.
something's up.
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, She gave a situation about a family member that she used to be very mean to when they were little.
Mhm, mhm,
And she was feeling a lot of guilt about that.
mhm,
Okay, so she was aware of guilt. And when we started talking, I came to realize that the guilt was inappropriate.
mhm, mhm.
Inappropriate guilt, self-attack.
Yep, yep,
Okay. She actually was like 4 when it happened.
yeah,
So, she wasn't maliciously trying to do something. Appropriate guilt might be, like stealing money from your grandma's wallet. Like, yeah, you should probably feel
sure,
guilty about that,
yeah, yeah.
So anyways, long story short, we got to the fact that she's actually really angry at this family member.
Mhm,
And in the session, she was like, it was this expression, and we were talking about it. I had her feel her anger in her body, which shows up as heat.
mhm,
I don't know,
mhm,
always.
mhm.
Anger is heat in the body. It's
Yep,
not a verbal process. It's a
yep.
non-verbal, experiential,
Mhm,
physical sensation process.
mhm,
That's just for you.
mhm,
And I walked her through an exercise. She was able to do that, and she
mhm.
was like, "My pain's gone right now."
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So it really is such a part of the treatment, the healing.
yeah. Yeah, when the emotions really get flowing, it makes a huge difference for
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
we are starting to bump up against the hour, and so we're going to wrap up. Before
Okay.
we do, anything else you want to say to people? And so keep in mind, a lot of people out there listening have been working on this for a long time, understand the mind-body medicine concept, and still find themselves stuck in one way or
Yeah.
another. Anything else that you want to let them know?
The main thing I'm going to reiterate some of what I said. So, like, I'll summarize the main points. There is one that you may or may not have trauma. So it's about the way that term is conceptualized and understood.
Mhm,
So I would be looking for someone who can assess for that.
mhm, mhm,
A TMS PPD, mind body disorder, psychologist or psychiatrist or MD,
mhm,
somebody who can really look for if that is part of your puzzle piece that has not been addressed,
mhm,
okay? Because that is something that can absolutely perpetuate the pain cycle. So trauma would be something that maybe hasn't been looked at. Can't tell you how many clients say, "Oh, I don't have any trauma. My childhood was great." And then
mhm.
when we really look at it, there's stuff there
Yep,
that
yep,
they
yep.
have feelings about, right? That they really need to work through, and it's part of the pain. So that's one. Number two, are you obsessed with getting rid of your symptoms?
Mhm,
And if you are, that must stop. Okay. And it must stop in a way where we understand how to do that, because it's not easy. It's paradoxical. It's not instinctual. So becoming out to come independent, okay, maybe something they're struggling with. Okay. Um, the pain beliefs. Are there any lingering doubts? Are they still using physical treatments in tandem with mind body treatments?
mhm,
That, in my opinion, is not going to work.
mhm.
I believe, and I can't tell a client, don't go do that physical treatment, right? But
Yeah.
what I can say is what I have found in my experience and in clients and so forth is that if we're going to the chiropractor who's saying one thing and doing a physical treatment, you're really telling your brain as you walk into that office, I have a physical problem.
Mhm, mhm.
And then you're going over here and doing mind body medicine treatment. It's like we got to pick a side, right?
Yeah.
So that's sometimes a problem that's keeping people stuck.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm,
And then just again, how are they what's their response
mhm,
to the sensations when they are aware of them, which is usually always,
mhm,
and or when it really increases?
mhm,
What do they think? What do they do? How do they
mhm,
feel?
mhm,
And there's usually something amiss there.
mhm.
Right? There's usually something that is not, we're not applying the knowledge in that area in
Yeah,
a way that's going to be helpful.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the last thing I'd say is go live your life.
Mhm,
Live your life. Do
mhm,
not really don't assume a sick role.
mhm,
Don't
mhm,
talk about your pain all the time to people.
mhm,
Educate your family and friends to no longer ask you about your symptoms.
mhm, mhm.
Develop a different identity.
Yeah,
do things that make you uniquely you.
Mhm.
Don't be pain. So those are the main things I think I would summarize with.
Yeah. And if people are interested in learning more about you or your practice, how do they find you?
Sure. So my website is
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
www.painpsychologistla.com. So it's just all one word, lowercase, painpsychologistla.com. And on that website, if you go to contact, you'll see my email and you'll see the phone number you can call.
Mhm.
And that would be the best way.
Good, good. And are you open to working with people one-on-one, or do you take new clients at the moment?
I am taking new clients. I do virtual appointments. Right now, I am limited, unfortunately. Will be working on that.
Mhm.
I am limited right now to seeing clients anywhere in the state of California.
Okay.
I cannot cross state lines right now.
Got it. Got it. Okay, great. So we're going to end there for the evening. I would love to keep talking with you,
I
and we're
know. I
out of
know.
time. There's so much more to talk about, but thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here and sharing your insights and your experience. And I know how much people appreciate it when we as practitioners are able to do that. For those of you listening, folks at Curable have a number of exercises about CBT, and catching thought traps is one, and all or nothing thinking and fortune telling. And so if you look in the app, you can find some information about some of what Jennifer and I have been talking about. Thank you all to all of you who've been here listening. Each time we record an episode, and each time I do anything in this mind body medicine world, I'm reminded how lucky I am to be part of this brave and cutting edge community that's working on symptoms this way. As I mentioned earlier, here in Chicago, we've been able to expand our own telehealth options. And so if you're interested in meeting with me or with any of our clinical psychologists who are now licensed in 28 states around the country, please reach out to us at our website, www.drstracks.com. And if you enjoyed this video cast, you can find our previous episodes and get information about upcoming episodes at www.curablehealth.com/hope for healing. You can also sign up for our newsletter there. I will be back in 3 weeks on Wednesday, March 9th at 5 p.m. Central Time for another episode. And until then, I hope everybody stays safe and healthy. And I hope everybody has a good evening.